Eric, warm welcome to Startup Grind. Great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So this is not the first time you're part of Startup Grind here in Hong Kong. You were also a moderator at one of our Agile events a few years back, I think it was.
It's been a while, yeah, but I'm glad we're doing more of this again. It was quiet for a while there, but I've been a fan and active participant in Startup Grind events for years.
And today's topic about podcasting is super important because it's a very good way of getting a message out there and also a way of, as you will tell us probably later, to learn new things. But before we start going into podcasting, could you make a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. So I'm Eric Byron, an American living in Hong Kong, and my background is actually IT for many years, computer science and technology, also some background in entertainment, and ended up in the video game industry, made some games, had just a blast there, 6 years at EA. Then after coming to Asia, just kind of broad exposure in software development, project management, many different kinds of projects, and then got into startups. I had my own startup here, an edtech startup in Hong Kong. And then I did some learning games with the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and some other projects. And now I'm doing podcasting. So you pointed out I've had 2 podcasts. I had one, the first one's called No Harm in Asking, co-hosted by Michael Kerr and myself. And now I've got one that I'm doing myself called the Education Innovators Podcast.
Cool. So 2 podcasts so far under your belt. So what inspired you to start these 2 podcasts, and what do you think is a good reason for starting one?
Well, part of what we learned is that it's really about passion and curiosity, right? And so Michael and I started No Harm in Asking literally out of curiosity. We didn't know anything about podcasting. All we knew was there were millions of podcasters out there, and we had a particular kind of mission. We wanted to understand the questions. How do really good podcast hosts come up with great questions? And then we got into all of the different formats and styles and genres, and it was really just this lesson, this study and analysis of podcasting is what that whole podcast was about. 39 episodes, just learning a whole bunch. But by the time we finished that, I thought, well, now I should come up with a topic myself. What am I curious about? What am I passionate about? And innovation education was something that's been high on my mind for a long time. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do a podcast about that.
And for both of these, of course, you, as you said, you started the first podcast to learn yourself, but you also have to have, I guess, some kind of audience in mind. So how do you find a target audience to go for, and how do you engage with them?
Yeah, so this was actually quite an interesting study at the beginning, right? Because we didn't know this either, right? Going in, right? How do people find their audiences, and why do some have millions of subscribers and others can do this for years and have just a small number of listeners? So, and what we came to the conclusion of was that you can't try to alter your podcast to what you think an audience wants to hear. You have to be true to your own curiosity and passion. Pick a topic that you want to do and stay on that. Sometimes you hit it big, crime junkies, and she went out there. What's her name? I can't think of her name now, off the top of my head. Anyway, she was interested in crime stories, and so she started doing a podcast about it. Turned out there were millions of people who enjoyed this. It became huge. We've seen some others who have been more niche, and they're happy. They've done hundreds of episodes and have a small number of followers, but a dedicated group of followers who love what they do, but it's a small number. So sometimes you just gotta roll the dice and put it out there and see who finds you.
And maybe sometimes the smaller specialist podcast that are niched, they can also, they make an impact on the world, but it could also be working out really well for them. But when you say this, it sounds like there's a pretty big industry in podcasting, and I know you taken a look at some of those numbers. How big is it, and sort of what are the trends?
Yeah, so I did do some research this week just to kind of update myself too on the industry and where it's going. It's still growing, so it's over 400 million listeners now, with an estimate that by the end of this year there'll be about 500 million people who listen to podcasts. So, and by podcast we are kind of specifying audio, so not video blogs or YouTube channel, but pure audio podcast, about 500 million listeners. There's something like 5 million podcasts on Spotify, and the stats I saw were like 2.5 million on Apple podcasts. There's a bunch of different platforms where people can listen, but yeah, it's a pretty large group of podcasters and listeners, and it is growing. It's a $23 billion industry in 2023. Yeah.
That's amazing. And at the same time, as you said, some of the news channels I follow on YouTube, I also see that sometimes they have placeholders for audio only content, basically a podcast. And I guess it's both the video and the audio work. So now, how significant has podcasts become in today's media landscape?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the smart content creators are saying, if I've got good content, I should get it out there in all formats. So, and you'll see this going both directions. You'll see somebody who's producing a podcast for audio and then putting it on YouTube just to get it on YouTube, even if it's not video, right? Put up a placeholder image and the sound and let it go just to get it on that platform. You also have people who are producing for YouTube who are then taking the audio and throwing it on the podcast channels to get it out there. So, and this is good, right? You should do that. Don't ignore the podcast platforms as as another channel to get your story out there and your content.
Yeah, because you want to be as searchable as possible or as findable as possible, I guess. Now, as you mentioned, you have audio podcasts and you have video podcasts, and then you have people doing webinars and more video content where the images, of course, play an important role. So is a video podcast the same as an audio podcast, or what similarities are there and what differences are there, and what should you think about?
Yeah, so my only advice there, and this is just maybe a personal thing, but record to your primary target there. So if your primary audience is going to be YouTube, record with that on mind, with the video, with visuals, whatever, but if your primary audience is audio, then, really focus on that. And, I hate those distractions where I'm listening to a podcast and I hear somebody say, oh, look at this, they're holding something up, or, they're displaying some image, in the middle of the video, and you can't see it because you're listening. To me, that's just annoying, right? Do your content to the platform you're going to be on. Now, there's other people who just say, hey, just get it out there. Don't worry. Just, Gary Vee, I think you guys talked to Gary Vee one time. I missed that one when he was in Hong Kong, but we actually reviewed his podcast as part of No Harm in Asking. And I personally thought his content was terrible in terms of the quality, but it's a massive amount of content and he just throws it out there. No polish. The audio quality was terrible and it was a mess, but that was his theory, was just go. Put it out there. Don't worry about editing or filtering or your environment. You got something to say it, throw it out there. So lots of different theories.
Yeah, no, I remember that event with Gary Vee, and I think at that event, and this is 2017, he mentioned that podcasting or audio content is the thing to go for because it allows a person who is, doing exercise too. You don't have to watch the screen. You can still participate. You said sometimes the platforms, and you mentioned Spotify and Apple, etc. So how many platforms are available to publish online, and is there an efficient way to get on them all at the same time?
Yeah, so what we do is we use a hosting platform called Podbean. There are others, and it's quite a competitive market, actually. Michael and I stumbled upon Podbean early on. It was fairly cheap, and it worked for us, so I stayed with it. No reason to change. But what Podbean allows me to do is it gives me a platform where I can put my episodes up. I upload them to there. I put show notes in. I can put a graphic for each episode, up there, and then as soon as it hits and I hit publish on Podbean, it goes out to Apple, to Spotify, to iHeartRadio, to Google. There's like a dozen or more platforms that can pick it up. There's probably about a half a dozen that are the most common ones out there, but you can connect them all is the point, and you want to do that. You don't want to go through the hassle of trying to keep a bunch of them manually synced and your episodes out there and having problems. The other benefit of having a hosting platform like Podbean is metrics, because I get the stats back from all of those other platforms. So if you listen on Spotify or you listen on Apple, I still see those stats on Podbean and can see how my episodes are doing, which ones are more popular, who's listening, and what platforms they're listening on.
And then you talk about an important thing, or maybe it's an important thing to keep yourself going. Like, how do you tell if your audience is engaging with your podcast? Where would you say that you have sort of captured the listener?
So, well, the first metric, I guess, that really matters is, well, there's downloads. Downloads in the audio world, they call them views in YouTube. But that's the kind of the first level of engagement, right? Somebody's listening, somebody's watching. But it's not really engagement, from my opinion, until you get subscribers, right? If subscriber means I didn't just stumble upon this one episode, or it's my wife's friend, whatever. So I've watched this one episode or downloaded it, to be polite because somebody sent me the link, but they actually subscribe. Now you found your people, right? They're subscribing. They like your content. They want to keep listening. They want to anticipate and hear future episodes you're going to do. So engagement kind of starts with subscriptions, but then it goes beyond that, right? Real engagement is now the folks who, sign up for your newsletter, or they're following you on LinkedIn now, or they're looking for your web page or your Facebook group, and they're making comments, they're liking episodes, right? There's all these other levels of engagement you can get into, which can also be tied to monetization.
Yeah, and that you create that platform that actually also gives you revenue from the stuff that you love. But what are your thoughts about working with the sponsor or patrons on Patreon, for example?
Yeah, I wish I had some. So actually, I don't really care about that. Michael and I, when we did No Harm in Asking, we weren't trying to make money off of this. We were literally just trying to learn and to share what we were learning as we went. And it was a blast. 39 episodes out there. We did learn a lot. Same thing with the Education Innovators one. I'm not trying to make money on this one, but I'm really enjoying what I'm getting to learn. Now, that said, sponsors can be a good thing. Well, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. You can have like a key sponsor, an anchor, somebody who, consistently sponsors your show. The more common thing is advertisers or advertisements that run during your podcast. And even Podbean, I could just flip a switch and turn that on and try to make some money by allowing Podbean to interject ads into my podcast. I'm not doing that. I think it can be annoying sometimes. You get like a minute or 2 minutes of advertisements, and you don't get to pick what they are. They could be anything that may have nothing to do with your target audience. You have no control once you just kind of turn those things on. So sponsors better than just advertisers, but people got to make money sometimes, and they do a podcast, it gets popular. You can make good money if you've got enough subscribers.
Yeah, and I guess then you also have affiliate marketing and etc.
Yes.
Now, turning it around, can you use podcasts to launch a product or a service as a startup?
You can. And so one of the things I encourage businesses to think about if they're looking at doing a podcast is it doesn't have to be an ongoing every week or every month. I got to come up with new content. You can do a mini series on Netflix, right? You can kind of storyboard it out and go, what's the story I want to get out there? And, can I do this in, 4 or 5, maybe 6 episodes, right? To tell the story, and then just stop it there, right? Less is more. I'd rather see somebody do, 5 really good quality episodes, 30 to 45 minutes each, and put that out there and be done and say, there's my story. It's out there for anybody to see, and it's on all the platforms. I put it on the audio on podcast, and I did a video on, YouTube, and it's out there. But it is a great way to tell your story.
And then maybe it's a good point from you there. Some companies might just put those videos or podcasts on their website because that's where they think they should belong. But you should actually put them on all the other platforms as well so that they can continue living and potentially,
Yeah. Well, and just as a case in point there too, the other effect we get. So no harm in asking. Michael and I haven't published a new episode since December 2022. We got through 39, and then I don't know. I can't remember exactly what was happening there. I think I was traveling, he was traveling, whatever. We kind of took a break and never came back to it. But I think we had like 5,000 downloads when we stopped publishing, and now we have like 14,000 downloads. So people are still listening. They're finding those episodes. They're very searchable. We have an episode out there that has Joe Rogan's name in it. On Apple. So people search for Joe Rogan, our episode pops up and they listen to it, right? And so, so you can put content out there and just let it go. People, if it's still relevant, people will still listen and find value in it. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah, and everything it will essentially also have a date on it so that if somebody says, oh, this is 3 years old, but having it out there is much, much better than hiding it away on your website or something like that. Now, what tools and technology do you need to start podcasting, and sort of do you use any specific software to make a podcast good?
Well, so one of the great things about podcasting is extremely low barrier to entry. If you've got a simple microphone or camera on your laptop or whatever, you can record and go at it. Most of ours, well, many of No Harm in Asking, and virtually all of my ones with the Education Innovators Podcast are done over Zoom. So, I don't use any fancy studio equipment or whatever to do that. We did buy microphones. So I do have, it's called an M Audio Duo. It's a little box that you can plug 2 different microphones into and dual channel record. So dual track. So I have that, and we have Movo microphones. It was less than $200 US, I think, for that setup. But what we found was the quality was really no better in the audio than a decent headset like this on a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever.
Yeah, and so when you have the Zoom audio file, what can you then do with it to make sure that there's no background noises, etc., and or if somebody is louder than somebody else, what do you normally do to make?
So there is some software that you need. I use Audacity for dual track stuff. So like if I want to add background music to something, I can do dual track recording stuff, editing in Audacity. I use WavePad audio. It's just something I had used years ago when I was doing sound effects for game development. I mentioned the stuff I did for the PolyU. I did all the sound editing for that in WavePad, so I'm just familiar with it. It does have the stuff for like noise reduction, so you can go in and grab a sample of a buzz that's in the background or a noise and say, just remove this from the whole thing, and it does it automatically. What else am I using? I'm using a free tool I found called Levelator that's brilliant. So what Levelator does is it's specific for voices, and it will You want to get rid of the background noise and nonsense first, but then you throw it in level later. And when you have people that either, if they've got a fixed mic and they tend to move around, and so the voice is different volume levels depending on where they are in proximity to their microphone, that can be a real problem. Bless Michael. I love Michael, but Michael used to do that all the time when we had the mics, and we'd sit here and do that, and he'd sit back, when he was talking, and he'd fade out. Level later fixes it. So it just, brings them all up. It doesn't change tone, and when I get louder, I get excited. It doesn't necessarily do that, but it helps level those places where audio was fading out. So a brilliant free tool, just run it through there, and that helps a lot. The other one I'm using now, I just started using because it'll also do video, is Descript. So what it does is it uses AI actually to find and filter out all the ums and ahs. So, and we all do it, right? I do it badly sometimes when I'm recording. Anyway, your guests do it too. And so you want everybody to sound good on your recording and what you publish. So Descript, it's like $12 a month, and it saves me hours because it do the video and audio in seconds and find hundreds of these little speech ticks, we call them, and just edit them right out.
Yeah, and I'm going to run this video through Audiate, which basically does the same thing. So we'll see if that long and ahs are still in there or not. But yeah, all these tools, of course, helps us to get a more polished end quality, and still it doesn't take forever to do it. Now looking at, so that was a technical thing. How do you then structure episodes and maintain a consistent format across your episodes?
Well, there's kind of two theories on that. One is you want to be consistent, and the other is you don't want to be consistent. So you want to be consistent in timing of your releases. That's really, really important. Once you start getting subscribers, now they're waiting for your episodes and having a cadence, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, whatever, stick to something or explain it if you change your pattern so people understand what you're doing and they know what to expect. In terms of the format, though, I actually love the ones who change it up regularly. Call it agile. People who know me know I love agile principles. So you want to test different formats. You want to try different things. You want to mix it up. And we've seen some of the best ones will have kind of maybe 2 or 3 different formats that they mix together. So some of their episodes, they may even tag them that way, a name, and say, oh, this is a guest one, and this is a me on a rant one, and this is a, whatever, kind of format. This is our read letters from the audience day, right? And you have some of those. And so I love that. People kind of mix it up and try different formats and see what resonates with people, what gets that engagement going.
Yeah, no, that's a very good tip. And also it makes it, when you make the podcast, it also makes it more fun that you can also mix up the different formats. When it comes to promoting your podcast, how do you promote it, and how do you grow your listening base?
Yeah. So, well, this is tricky, because one of the things we learned right away was it can actually have a negative effect if you're out there too much promoting your podcast, right? So if you're on Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media platforms just plugging away, oh, I got this great episode, go listen, and it turns people off, right? They don't want to be spammed all the time with messages to go listen. So the actual better tactic and strategy is to post a lot of content that kind of shares messages and topics and ideas and shows you as an interesting person in the subject area, but doesn't come across as a promotion for your show. You want people to kind of be aware of you, and they see you putting out good content and going, oh, who is this guy? Then they click on your profile and go, oh, he's got a podcast. Let me go listen to his podcast. That's a much, much more effective way of getting listeners than just hitting everybody with a stick. Now, we got flooded with folks who wanted to promote our podcast. So as soon as you put a podcast out there, everybody comes out of the woodwork saying, oh, for $100, I can get you thousands of listeners and subscribers. Word of caution, 99% of those are fake, right? What they do is they run bots or whatever, and they generate stats for you, but they're not really your people. Right? It just increases your metrics, and we do see a lot of podcasters kind of start that way because it is a dilemma, right? You need to have a certain number of kind of downloads and listeners and subscribers in order to get the platforms to kind of raise you up in the search results. Right? So it's almost this kind of catch-22 of how do people find me if the platforms aren't kind of promoting me, but they won't promote me till I get to a certain number of listeners. So my only advice there is work hard, put a lot of good content out, and if people want to listen, they're going to find you, and it just takes time.
Yeah, and then as you said, make sure that you create other side content, you can call it, that sort of interlinks with this and also makes it possible to find. Now, we talk about a lot of different platforms, and we mentioned YouTube a few times, and I think you also mentioned music when we talked about what the technical stuff. So from as soon as we use music, we are potentially using something that somebody else has a right to. So what legal and ethical considerations do you need to keep in mind while podcasting and planning your podcasts?
Yeah. Do you know if somebody's looking for me? I am careful. I try not to, use anything that's licensable, in there. There's a bunch of libraries out there actually of free, usable, unrestricted music that's out there. And over the past several years since I've been doing this, as I stumble upon them, I will usually try and grab a bunch of that audio so I don't have to go looking for it or find that it's no longer available. I just download it, and I've created a local library of music choices that I use. Now, I do occasionally use stuff that I find from like a trailer or whatever. I'll take music. I do a lot of stuff around games and gaming. So I'll find music track from a game or sound from a game, and I'll include that in. But when I do, I make sure I say it in the podcast. This is from this game, and I have it in the show notes. And I've never had anybody come after me, when you really acknowledge what you've got and where it's from. But do be careful of this. Yeah, you can't just grab some famous person's song and put it in your podcast. And I haven't been hit with it on Podbean yet, where they've checked and come back and questioned something. But YouTube does actually, they check your content and they look for music that would be licensable. And they've identified some of mine saying, we recognize this as this, and they found it, but then, they say, oh, but it's okay to use. But they did find it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I recognize that from when we upload these videos to YouTube. There is a checking point as well. Yep. And as you said, when you do a review of something or a music piece and have a comment about it, that's completely different from just using it as background music. Yeah. So I guess the algorithms are getting smarter and smarter also to understand when somebody's commenting about music or when somebody is using it as a background. Now, when that sort of also takes us into the future, when it comes to podcasting, how do you stay updated on all the changes and so on and new tools that comes out there?
Yeah. So, well, you know me, I'm a tech guy, so I am on the forums and stuff and watching this. I got on a bunch of forums about podcasting when we were doing the No Harm in Asking, and I still kind of keep an ear to the ground there, what's going on in the industry. And so if you're really interested in podcasting, there are several major groups out there and communities around some of the conferences. Podcast Movement comes to mind is one of the ones where you can really see people talking about the industry and trends there. I really don't worry too much though about the trends, because I want to be true to me and true to what I'm doing and not worry too much about what other people are doing. So, again, I encourage you. Now, there's AI tools and things like Descript, and you mentioned another tool that'll do these things. Please use the tools. These make life so much easier now than they used to be, and the ability to create graphics and and stuff to go along with your videos, on animations and stuff. There's all kinds of advances and tools there. One of the ones we've been talking about, one of the reasons Michael and I never did video was because we figured we're two old guys, talking to each other. Nobody wants to see us, right? They'll listen to us, but nobody wants to look at two old guys. But, maybe we could do avatars that look younger and more attractive than us, to replace us in the video. But, 3 or 4 years ago, that was not possible. Now, all of a sudden, it is possible to do that, which gets us into another concern I have, though, about some of the tech is the ability to do fakes. And, you got to be careful now that what you're watching, what you're listening to is really the person whose voice you think you're hearing or whose image you think you're seeing. It could be faked. And I'm hoping the platforms like YouTube develop the tools to detect this stuff too. They ask you now if you've got anything like that in there, but I think soon they're going to need to be able to actually detect it and flag content and say, yeah, this is not, Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whoever they're faking, right?
Yeah, no, and I mean AI will affect lots of different businesses, and of course this is one of those. And you want to make sure that you're actually listening to the real person and so on. Before we wrap up, what has been one of your most memorable episodes, and why does it stand out to you?
Well, I guess most recently I'd have to, plug my episode with Nolan Bushnell, the father of video games. So this was just like, meeting a hero. He's the founder of Atari, the creator of Pong, and he authored a book called Shaping the Future of Education, the Exodexa Manifesto. And he and his co-author came on my show. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about, that they offered to come on the show. I didn't even chase them and ask them. I had been talking to his co-author about some ideas I had for Exodexa, and she offered to get Nolan on the show with me. So that's been a highlight. This is the privilege of doing a show like this, is just so many thought leaders and really, really smart people with books and all kinds of stuff out there that I've had the privilege to talk to. But Michael and I had some great ones too. Malcolm Gladwell, Revisionist History was one of my favorite ones we reviewed. Adam Grant is great. Megan Dahm. There's a bunch of them there that we reviewed. Entrepreneurs on Fire, John Lee Dumas. You talk about a master of podcasting and monetization. He did a new episode every single day for 3 years when he started to build his audience. 20 minutes every day for 3 years. And when we reviewed him, he had like 3,000 episodes out there. I mean, you talk about a hard working guy, but high energy, really fun. For entrepreneurs out there, he's a podcast I recommend. Entrepreneurs on Fire. Go find him. Be a member of Fire Nation. He's all excited about it.
Which leads me to another question I just have to ask. I mean, how do you, if you are, releasing one podcast episode per day, how do you plan your life, or how do you plan your life when you have also, you also publish regularly. So any tips and tricks about that?
Yeah, I do it all myself. And so it is hard. I will say, I don't get to do too many other things without stressing myself out, because I'm going to miss that cadence, right? I'm going to publish every, week on Tuesday. And so one of the things that really helps is to batch stuff. So line up a bunch of recordings and then get them edited, ready to publish ahead of schedule. So now I can kind of have a break, right? So I get a week where I get like 3 episodes ready, and now, I can relax a little bit, maybe shift gears towards trying to find more guests to be on the show, right? So I kind of go through periods of finding guests and then recording and editing. That also keeps it kind of breaks it up, right? So mixes up the effort. And then the other very time-consuming piece is being on social media, right? Like you say, you just got to be out there trying to post and come up with clever things to talk about that get people to click on your profile.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned batch processing because when you're working with all of these different tools, it's also good to keep fresh on them. So that
Yes.
makes it also faster.
Yeah.
Eric, it's been a great pleasure to have you here on Startup Grind. I think we learned so much about how we all can start our own podcast, and it isn't that hard.
It is not. You should try. Everyone who's got a thought, has a story to share, something they're curious and passionate about, just get it out there. It's not that hard. It really isn't.
It doesn't need to be an hour. It can be just a few minutes, and that's enough. So,
yes.
So once again, big thank you from Startup Grind, and we hope to see you in the future events, Eric, and maybe come back also as an interviewer in a future episode.
Oh, I'd love that. So, well, thank you very much for having me, Jens, and to everybody out there, please, we've got a link in the chat, I think, and the notes here, so you can find my podcasts and give them a listen. I hope you enjoy it.
Definitely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.